Hey everyone, Brian here, and we're talking about a new racing game from Bizarre, but it might not be what you think. It's called Blur, and we're talking with Ben Ward of Bizarre. Ben, you guys have a racing pedigree behind you with a lot of games in the past, but Blur takes your racing pedigree in a different direction, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Blur introduces things like storyline to a racing game, power-ups, a completely different car set and environment set to what you might be used to for PGR games, and we're really sort of like taking everything we've learned from that and applying it to something completely new. Licensed cars, real-world environments, awesome graphics and sound, the physics model, all of these things we did really, really well before, so we just decided really early that we're going to stick to that sort of thing, you know. But then they're also going to see like power-ups and storyline and be like, what the hell are you guys doing, you know? So what we've done is approach them in a really sort of what we think is a sensible way. So for instance, a storyline won't have big sort of dirty cutscenes with half-naked women and stuff like that, guys with a baseball cap on backwards, you know. We're not going to do any of that. It's delivered through a social network, so all of the sort of interaction you have with all the characters in the game will be through like text messages and invites to groups, and it's all sort of like racing centric as opposed to trying to make it something it's not really. So we've got all these new features, but we're trying to approach them in a way that is actually applicable to the racing genre and not just stupid. The storyline itself is actually delivered in such a way so that, for example, in one of them you might have like a public area for the social network where all the AI are posting messages and they're like, hey, good job, you beat XYZ, and you know, that was really good racing, well done and stuff. But then XYZ comes along, sends you a private message and says, you son of a bitch, you know, I'm gonna kick your butt, you do that again, I'm gonna mess you up. So then you go and he invites you to a private race, just one-on-one, you and him, in like this secret area that you haven't seen before. So it's delivering story, but it's done in a way that is slightly more believable and slightly more sort of like sort of familiar to people who already use things like Facebook and MySpace and all that. The storyline is delivered in a way so that it pushes you around the world. You go from like LA to the West Coast generally, then the East Coast of America, then to Europe, then to sort of the Far East like Tokyo and all those places. So the approach through the storyline arc is linear, but then within that certain things are unlocked based on your race actions. So if a certain amount of time trial races, if you set a certain number of hot laps and really, really good lap times, somebody will invite you to the time trial group, and then you'll sort of have another 5 or 6 races in that area of something that it's sort of unlocked based on how you play the game. So that's really exciting as well, that, you know, it's not, when you play it, not everyone's going to get the same races. We've got team-based racing in Blur, so some of them might be team objectives, help your team win, or protect one of your teammates, or something like that. Some of them might be like pick up power-up objectives, so collect X amount of nitro or whatever. Stunt-based objectives we have as well, certain amount of airtime or whatever, however we decide to implement that when you get to the stunt chapter. Damage runs as well, so using the power-ups to cause a certain amount of damage to other cars and bits of the environment and stuff. So really like mixing up what you have to do to be successful, and then providing sub-goals so that there's 2 things you have to think about at once in the race. So there's always going to be like strategy and things to think about as you play the game. The way that we've approached power-ups is slightly different to other racing games. They won't decide the result of the race. They won't sort of like a shell will fly over and blow up the first 5 guys. That's not going to happen in Blur. All of our power-ups take skill to use effectively. So for example, we have one called Shunt, which is like a sort of missile type thing that fires out the front of your car. If you hit the other cars on the back left or the back right, that will spin them out. So, you know, you can obviously use that to your advantage and sail past them. But if you hit them sort of right on the back bumper, dead on, it will just push them forward and it will give them a boost. So, you know, you've got to be careful how you use that particular thing. It sort of augments your racing rather than actually sort of just press the button and does it all for you, you know. We've got one called Barge, which shoots like a beam of energy out either side of your car. You guys saw this in the demo. But if you just use that on a straight, it will just sort of like shove your opponents aside and not really do that much. They'll lose a bit of speed, but they'll come straight back on you, right? But if you use that on the separation of an alternate route, for example, you can push them into the barrier, or if you use it on a hairpin, you can like push them off the apex, or you can push them into like dynamic objects, you know, smash them into like a parked car or something like that, and really sort of screw up their race. That's the idea. You have to think about when you're going to use them. we've approached it slightly differently in that realism isn't the king anymore. It's not going to be millimeter perfect. We don't want that to get in the way of the gameplay. Before we had like, you know, certain routes, and if the track went in a certain way in real life, if the roads were actually in that configuration, we were slavish to that. We absolutely made it so that the roads were exactly the same, right? But then if that wasn't a particularly good racetrack, we couldn't do much about it. We could lower curbs and stuff, but that was pretty much it. So what we've done with Blur is take the best bits of all these cities and stick them together, and effectively, like, it's still got the feel and the mood of these places. It's still, if you look at Hackney, it's still got all the landmarks that you have in London, but and all the buildings that you'd expect. The colour scheme is correct. The shops are the same. A lot of the city streets are the same as real life, but it's just a really awesome racetrack. And that's what we've done. We've always been really big on online in Bizarre racing games. First of all, we have 20-car multiplayer, which pretty much gave our programmers a heart attack when the designers were like, oh, let's do 20 cars. But yeah, we've achieved it. So 20-car online races are in. 4-player split screen is in as well. So games don't really do that anymore for some reason, but you know, we think that we should totally, you know, like make the most of that. People have got 60-inch TVs now, and the resolution is 4 times what you had in the N64 days. So you know, there's absolutely no excuse to not have split screen. So we're definitely supporting that as well. And we've got like a lot of community features built around the game. So for example, our social network has a website built on top. So if you don't want to type messages into your console, you don't have to do that. You can use a keyboard, and you can like use each platform to its strengths. So really we're encouraging people to build more of a community around the game rather than forcing the game to control it in a certain way.
Sounds great. So let's wrap it up. Blur, what platforms is it coming out on, and when's it coming out?
It's planned to ship for fall 2009 for PC, PS3, and Xbox 360.
There you go. A look at Blur coming soon.